Well, happy Tuesday, everyone. Thank you for coming to our FileWave Q4 Alliance event. Thrilled as always to have you here. Our customers, the most important folks to us. So it's fantastic to have everybody here today. I really appreciate it. So my name is Scott Rouse, the head of customer success at FileWave. And like I said, thrilled to have you here. We've got a couple of really exciting agenda items that are separate, but that we're going to cover today in this Alliance meeting, and then hopefully at the end, if there's any questions and we have time for that, we would be happy to field those as well. So we're going to start off by talking about a new product line, a new solution that FileWave has that's particularly interesting for schools. And I'll run through that, kind of share that information with you, and then open up some opportunities for you to request some additional information if that's something that your organization's interested in. And then we'll move on to the heroes of our show, Tony and Josh, who are going to talk about some real interesting training opportunities there with FileWave's reporting features. So Josh, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide here. So I'm going to talk about a partnership, a solution partnership that we have with a company called TRUCE, and it's on a product called TRUCE Family. And essentially what TRUCE Family is a solution for cell phone disruptions, cell phone distractions in schools, right? Students bringing cell phones to schools, the high school or middle school level. It's something that just people are, teachers, administrations in schools are constantly dealing with. Go to the next slide, Josh. So, there's lots of talk about this, particularly in the US. It's made headlines, but even in Europe and the rest of the world, this is something that's happening as well. So move on to the next slide for us. There are some solutions that schools are using out there to try to deal with this, banning phones completely, putting the phones, asking students to put phones in these bags, in these cases, putting them into cubbies or lockers. But our solution is an app, is a software solution for that. We can go on to the next one. So this is basically an app that is installed on student devices. It's a partnership between the school and the parents. And when this app is installed on the phone, you can kind of click through the builds here if you want, Tony. When the student comes on campus during school hours, this is defined by the school administration, the phone essentially, and we can go into the next slide, the next build, I think, becomes a dumb phone, right? So once the student comes on campus, the phone remains with them, but the access to applications such as social media apps, iMessage, those sorts of apps, notifications, those are all blocked. So the phone is still there. The phone is still with the student. The school does not take on the liability of holding on to the phone, but the student's going to hold on to it. But all of the distractions are blocked. And we'll talk about some of the features here as we go through it. So for the school, obviously, the biggest benefit here is reduced distractions. So students are not constantly wanting to check their phones, whether in the classroom or even in the halls. And another real benefit for that, of course, is it's going to force that social interaction, real social interaction, not a social media interaction, between students, even between classes. The administration of it is quite simple from the school's point of view. You're just defining a policy that exists. So it's a geofence policy and a time and date policy. And then there's basically a school code that parents are using to implement that policy onto their student's phone, which I'll demonstrate here in just a second. So real benefits for the school, of course, freeing up lots of time that teachers are currently having to spend on policing phone use in their classrooms. And in addition, it reduces the liability on the schools for either taking away phones and then having the phones broken or misplaced. We hear lots of stories from schools where parents have come and said, well, you made my student put their phone in a box in a cubby and now it got stolen. So yeah, I need you to buy me an iPhone. That's no good. And then the other thing is that the rather than just banning the phones completely, many parents are pushing back on that and saying that they really would need access to get in touch with their child in an emergency, or they want their child to have emergency communication, or they want to be able to see the location of their child. This application allows all that to happen. So the parent can still see the location of the phone. The phone still functions as a telephone. Emergency calls can be made, and there's a system in place for the parent to send messages to the child that are non-disruptive, but that the child can check if they're non-emergency type messages, like don't get on the bus after school, we're going to come pick you up because we have a doctor's appointment, something like that. Let's move on to the next slide. So for parents, obviously, I talked about some of these benefits already. That communication is always there. Emergency communication is there. There's some additional benefits with the app for parents. The parent can, on their own choosing, can configure the application to block access to the device during certain hours. Let's say they want to set a bedtime of 9 p.m. for their kid. Well, the phone just won't work. The apps are blocked from 9 p.m. till 7 a.m. Whatever it is the parent sets up. They can set different schedules for weekends, so on and so forth. They can enroll the phone in a distracted driving prevention mode, so that when the phone is moving in a vehicle, the student's not able to text on it. So that's very interesting for sure. And then finally, for the student, we can move on to the next slide. And then I do see some questions coming into chat there that I'll take a look at some answers as well. I see Tony answering some as we go along, which is great. As far as student benefits, the really is there going to be some knee-jerk response to this that students don't like? Yes, probably. In the end, we really find that students are welcoming the opportunity to take a break from their devices. Right? If you're at school, you have your device, you're going to feel left out if you're not able to be in your social media apps and communicating like that. But with this, if no one's doing it, you're not able to do it at school. It relieves the students of that emotional burden that they may feel to do that. Gives them that period to interact. So we feel like we're giving kids, 6 or 7 hours of their day back, where they get to socially interact. They're forced to do that, as we did in the good old days, as they say, right? So to sum it up there on the next slide, when students are on campus during these hours, provided it turns the phone into a quote unquote dumb phone, there is an opportunity to open up use or access to those phones in specific locations if a school chooses. Essentially, the school can install a device, a beacon, a Bluetooth beacon in certain areas to say, all right, well, when you're in the lunchroom, your phone comes back on. And when the student enters that room, the phone access to those apps comes back on. That's a choice that a school makes. And then there's additional access that schools can allow with that. Schools can whitelist websites, whitelist apps that they need to allow for students that need assistive technology or have other needs within the school. So on the next slide, if we compare some of the solutions there, if we don't allow phones at all, if we ban phones completely, of course, that eliminates the distractions that happen here, but parents typically are pushing back very hard with that, right? So there's always exceptions. There are students that need to have their phones for assistive technology or some specific medical needs. If we put phones in pouches or in lockers, the staff is still having to deal with this. They're having to deal with vandalization of the devices. And the phones are not available in emergencies without the device being unlocked or the phone being retrieved from the pouch. Versus with the solution that we're offering here, we get all of the benefits of reducing those distractions. The parents get the added benefits that they can use at home and outside of the school time, and they are still able to keep in touch with their student if they want to. On the other side, of course, there's no perfect solution. So schools still need to come up with what their policy is going to be and decide how they want to monitor that. Ultimately, there's no short of a metal detector and you just confiscate all phones at the door, which we've already talked about is a solution that's probably not going to be palatable for most schools and most parents. Other than that, there's going to be some sort of compliance monitoring that's involved in this. And the way that I've heard put it best, and actually Tony said this, which is, basically if you see a kid on their phone, they're out of compliance, right? When the app is active, there's no desire to be on the phone. You can't do anything, essentially. So if the child is looking at their phone in class or looking at their phone in the hall, then they're probably out of compliance. Um, on, we'll move ahead. Let me go through this next slide, and then on the final slide here, I'll show you what some of that looks like. So the experience for parents enrolling here, essentially, like I said, it's a partnership. A school would decide they're going to implement this. They offer this as a solution to parents. We can help you explain the benefits and explain the process for your parents. The parent downloads an app on their phone and can create their family, right? So you can have multiple parents and they can have access to multiple children. And it could be parents or guardians, whatever it needs to be. And then the parent, the guardian, installs the app or has the child install the app on their phone. At that point, they basically enroll the device into a family. So they associate it with a parent, and then they can associate with a school through a school code that's given. So this is kind of showing that workflow, where in the third one there, they enter a simple letter number code that's given out, and then that school policy automatically is applied. So you don't have to go in and set that, but that is applied, and they're not able to change that school policy. From there, parents can add additional restrictions. So you see on that second slide, they can add, a homework restriction or driving restrictions in there. So lots of flexibility for that. Let's go to the next slide, Josh. Here, this first slide, you're seeing essentially what a student would see, what they could display if a school decides to do a compliance check. So maybe they want to check and see if devices are in compliance when kids come into school or come into a classroom. And that's completely optional. But that first slide would show what the screen shows in opposite of the final image there, the red one, which of course shows where the app is installed, but the phone is not in compliance. There's certain permissions that are disabled, location permission or screen time permissions that are permissions within the operating system, of course, that the phone or the student, the user needs to grant on the device. Also, we've some opportunities to gamify that on the first image there, that number 25 within the padlock. So that is, say, a streak, right? 25 days in a row where the phone has been in compliance. Schools could choose to offer some rewards for that. Once you reach 30 days, you get some special reward. Then you can get access to your device during lunch, or you get a pizza party, whatever it is you want to do. And it has been answered or has been mentioned here in the chat. There's nothing secretive or invasive happening behind the scenes. It's using the APIs that are built into the operating system. So all these screenshots, of course, are from iOS devices, and it's using the screen time API here within iOS to be able to set those time limits to block access to those apps. If you tried to click on the FaceTime app here in this example, you'd see that third screen, the access not allowed screen on there. So I believe there's some questions in the chat. I think Tony's answered all that in there. Is there student information that's saved or tracked from the device or the device information? The answer is no. It's using those APIs that are available to application developers through the operating systems. So the student, the parent, is going to grant location access and grant screen time access to the app, because of course that's needed to enroll this. but there's no other personal information that's shared or stored. There's no browsing information or anything like that that comes across through the servers here. As far as the removal of the app, somebody asked about that, and I think Tony answered that. So student can uninstall the app, like they could uninstall another app, but a parent would know. So in their parent portal, they would be able to see that their student is not in compliance there. And then, of course, if a school chooses to have some compliance system that they put through here, they check the devices, they would see that in there as well. So finally, on the next slide, there probably are lots of additional questions that folks have. Please reach out to us. I don't want to take up any more time here because I want to let you guys get to Tony and Josh. But contact us, sales@filewave.com or customer experience@filewave.com. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. You'll probably see some emails coming out about this here soon with some additional information and some opportunities to go through some webinars if you'd like. We're always looking for some schools that are interested, especially at this point. We're interested in really getting involved with us at the pilot level to help test it out. So if you think it's something that's of interest to your school, please reach out. We're not looking for a financial commitment at this point. We're happy to sort of discuss with you what that might look like, get some pilot plans in place, and really kick the tires on it and see how it works, and welcome your feedback on the product. And then ultimately we'll move that forward throughout the next year here. So thanks for your time, and I'll pass it over to Josh and Tony.
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're doing you may have noticed already that this Alliance event, we're doing a little bit differently than we normally do. Normally we're covering, releases and what kind of features are in there, and maybe some, ask me anything kind of stuff. But today we're going to do kind of a practical training event because we'd like you to go home with something, tangible that you can use in your environment. And specifically today, we're going to be looking at leveraging advanced reporting capabilities within FileWave for the topic of compliance. But I do want to be careful here. When I say advanced, we don't mean hard. We just mean things that people maybe don't use that much within the product. So we're going to look at this topic of compliance. Josh, could you go to the next slide for us?
Yeah.
And this is a representation of Josh and myself. The way we see ourselves, not necessarily the way that you see us, right? But I'm the VP of product here, and Josh is the global head of PS and training, and we're really excited actually just to do, a small training session here today because it's the thing that we enjoy doing the most. Next slide, Josh.
Should have updated. Oh, Tony froze for a second. He'll be back.
Yeah, my network took up there for a second. So we're talking about compliance today. You can go ahead to the next slide, but we're going to think about differently than just about FileWave. So just totally forget about FileWave for a moment. What's the goal of endpoint management? What are we looking to do with endpoint management? We're looking for efficiency, right? The problem is always. Do we lock up again? Oh no, we're looking to be effective as a team. Nobody has enough staff. How do we get the job done with not enough staff? How do we measure that efficiency? Well, you can go to the next thing. The basic measure for this is we're efficient when things for our customers work. And I always say that a good IT is an invisible IT. If they don't know you exist, everything's going great. Can you achieve that? Yes, you can if you're proactive in the way that you manage things. You can never do it perfectly. You can always get better, but you can't achieve that efficiency at all if everything you do is to react to tickets. If everything that you do is based on a customer complaining. So how can you manage proactively? Well, that comes from looking at, we're calling it compliance. It's a little bit of a stretch of the words here, but basically what we mean is what an old boss of ours used to say all the time, which was trust but verify, right? Trust that it's working, but verify that it's working. So that way you know for sure that things are the way that you expect them to be. And when we work with organizations, and we work with organizations all the time on this topic, what ends up getting missed is not necessarily, it's nothing about the tool set. It's thinking creatively about what types of things you might need to police from a compliance perspective, right? It's very rarely about the tool. It's usually about what things are we looking, to police. And do pardon my voice today. I'm a little under the weather. But next slide there, Josh. So when we're talking about compliance, we're not just talking about, silly rules about, like before what Scott was talking about, the iPhone stays in the locker. We're not talking about that, but we're talking about administrative or technical topics that make sure that the environment runs well, right? So we're talking about ensuring the security of endpoints, enforcing regulatory compliance, ISO certifications, FERPA, PCI, cyber insurance policies. How do we ensure stability and reliability of the endpoints? How do we empower end users? And you may notice a lot of these words are really strong, right? These are forceful words. That's because they're so important. We want all of these things to work, that the devices are there, and when people need them, they're going to work. They're not going to have a problem like being out of disk space, for instance. Next slide, Josh. Now, how we segue this back to FileWave is that FileWave is an outstanding tool for doing these types of things, right? But you may not think of it that way. The tool set that we use, you can go to the next animation.
Yeah.
How do we do this? Well, custom fields is one of the primary tools that we can use for this compliance. We can use smart groups. We can use the hardware and software inventory that comes in from endpoints. We can use the reporting engine that's built into FileWave. We can use geolocation and device messaging. And many of these tools you probably already use, but we're going to kind of touch on each of them today. Like almost everybody uses the kiosk, right? That's been recently kind of redone. But very few folks actually make use of the embedded Grafana for aggregate reporting. And we're especially going to cover that today. And then lastly, kind of tying all of this stuff together, all of the above, the topic that Josh and I brought up before of content packs, right? And so we're going to cover each of these tools just a little bit from a description perspective. And we're doing that because several of them are underutilized. And you may say, how do you know they're underutilized? Well, it's because we don't get enough questions about them. We don't get enough how do I questions on certain topics. And we love those types of questions, right? But we don't get enough questions, for instance, on how do I do something with Grafana. So we're going to show you a practical example of that today. All right. That last thing that was on that slide was, that there's all those tools, but the thing that we really have to provide is the imagination, the thing that we're doing. So if we think about this from a target perspective, if we want to do all these things, well, how do we actually do any of them? So Josh, if you want to hop over to that Miro board for just a second. So this is an example of things that can be done in kind of breaking these out into kind of those sub buckets. So if you look at security and regulatory compliance for a moment, what can we do to trust that that's all working right, but verify? So for instance, you're patching devices, right? Everybody's using FileWave to make sure their devices are up to date with stuff. But take the topic of antivirus for a moment. Well, okay, you're deploying a file set for antivirus. Let's say you use Sophos. You're deploying Sophos to your endpoints, but is it working? Right? Is it installed? Is it running? Are the antivirus versions up to date? These are all things that we can police with FileWave, especially with custom fields, but we'll talk about them in a bit. Those are things that we can look at, right? If we go to the other end of this, like in that last bucket of lessening emergencies, just looking at free disk space, right? It's a really common problem, actually, especially if you're buying kind of low-end machines for your users that they, maybe it's only got a 256 gig flash drive. It's going to run out of space, right? What happens when it runs out of space? Nothing good, right? So being proactive, and there are a lot of examples on here, like battery health, looking at the number of patches that are missing, is my testing software, is my core engineering software the right version? There's all of these different things that we can look for and then do some reporting on. right? So these are examples. If you've got examples of things that you're doing in your environment, feel free to throw them in the chat here. But we're going to flip back to that presentation for a second and kind of talk about each of these tools just a little bit quickly. Okay. So next slide there, Josh.
Next slide, yeah.
Yeah. So we know the kind of the things that we want to look for. How do we do it? And the first of those tools that we're going to talk about is custom fields. And custom fields, there are kind of two main versions of custom fields, either administrator-based custom fields, which are just fields that you can add to the schema within FileWave that allow you to look at other stuff. You can think of it kind of like a super CSV where you can import data into FileWave, and lots of folks use it for asset tag information. Almost everybody does that. But if you're a school district, you may use it for what school a device is in. If you're a small company, you may use it for geographic location. You may use it again for students for grade level. For a company, you may use it for department, like here's all the devices that are in finance. And you may define user role, like this is a manager, or this is an exempt employee, etc. Right, and that type of field can be bulk imported, and the sky's the limit with those. You can create as many as you want. Additionally, there's script-based custom fields that are for Mac and Windows only, and those allow us to look up anything that we want to from a device. So you can use Z Shell, PowerShell, Python, Batch. Those are the most common languages used for those fields, but we can look up things that are not in the inventory normally. So you can go to the next slide there, Josh.
There was one question that's worth answering. Jesse asked if there can be too many custom fields, and I would say one custom field, you have to think about the script and how much work it puts upon the machine. Like if you make a simple script that checks the amount of free space, that's nothing. If you make a script that searches file by file for some bit of text and churns the hard drive, it's going to make that machine busy, right? So that one script could be impactful. So you always want to think about the impact of that script. So I mean, I could say when we managed machines, we had like 150 custom fields that were running, and it wasn't really impactful because we thought about each script and how it would affect its performance.
It's not so much about the field, but the performance of the scripts behind them. So, for instance, if I'm managing Windows, I likely am not going to put some kind of custom field that reads GP result to get a group policy result, since it takes maybe a couple of minutes to run, and these things are run sequentially. I wouldn't want to do that, but there's usually ways of making that more efficient. So, but we'll talk about a couple examples here, just really briefly in the to save time here, a few examples of looking at custom fields that are that administrative based custom field. We mentioned asset tag. So asset tag is just assigned to all devices, and you can put in it, FW-1234 as the asset tag for the device, right? That's a very simple one. Almost everybody does that kind of custom field.
And one like this doesn't impact the machine because it's just storing value.
Yes, it's just stored in the database. It's just an extension of the schema.
Oh, and there was a note PN made also. If the script returns a large amount of text, like I make a script that's going to put a log file into a custom field, you want to think about 100 machines collecting 100 gigs of text. It's going to be not great for your server. So I guess the performance of the machine and what it's collecting.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a kind of a best practices document in the knowledge base. The second example here is one that's used a lot in schools, which is the role of the user. So in this example, we're looking at whether the user is a student or staff member, right? And you may notice this one, we've actually got a default value. We see we're providing a value, and it's only student or staff. Partially that's to make sure that the user doesn't, your other admins don't fat finger anything, and this stays controlled. But also, we default to student in this case. That's a default value. So that means any new device that's enrolled will automatically be assigned that student profile. So then this is mostly about security, right? This is about restrictions. So that way, by default, it behaves, the device like an iPad will behave as a student iPad, not as a staff iPad, right? So you can do lots of interesting things to control that. You can also do things like, again, this is another school example, but you can provide a list of school names or department names if you're in a company, right? So in this case, again, we've got a list of schools. This could be a list of departments, and this allows the admins not to make a mistake in data entry. And this one, you can see we defaulted to a value of none because this is a value that we need to manually set. There is no default value for this, but we want it to have some value so that we can tell when a device is improperly set. And the last example I think we have here is on a warranty end date or any kind of date related field. We like to show this one because it's not just limited to text fields. You can also do date fields and numeric fields. And so this allows you to do things like show me all devices whose warranty is ending in the next 90 days, right? We can create a report like that. All right, so those are the more simple administrator-based fields, and administrator-based fields can be used on all category of devices. But when we talk about custom fields that are script-based, they're kind of a totally different animal, and they only apply to Mac and Windows devices. I think there's a couple of animations in here, Josh.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so if we look at this first one, right, this is an example of using FileWave to look at the battery cycle count. You know, how many times the battery has been fully charged and discharged, right? This is assigned to all devices, but you'll see it's a client-based script, and this one is script-driven. And at the bottom, you'll see there's a Mac version of this and a Windows version. We'll show the Windows version in a second. But all this is doing is using System Profiler and then doing some grepping of values and set in there a little bit. We're going to talk about this in more detail in a second. And then I think we've got the same example, but on the Windows side, and you can see this is using PowerShell to use WMI to get information about the battery. So similar thing, that field is set up one time, and then we get additional inventory coming in from every device in the environment. Now we said all of that, right? And usually this topic of creating scripts, you can go to the next slide, Josh. Yep. When we talk about building scripts, everybody says the same thing, but I know what you're thinking. I'm not really good at scripting, right? I don't know scripts. But what we're going to do here, and we can just kind of click through these, but the first thing we're going to do is cheat, right? We're going to use search engines to look for answers. We're going to use AI, which is like a double search engine to look for answers. We're going to copy scripts from others, right? We're going to relax a little bit because there's always an answer and there's always somebody else that's done it before you. And if you can't find an answer, you can ask. That's why we have Discord, and you can share your own examples too. So all of these things are available to you. And especially I'm going to mention Discord here because there's really been a real uptick in volume that we've noticed. There's a lot of people sharing stuff in Discord. If you're not signed up for that, you really want to be, because you're usually not the first to come up with a thing, right? So you don't have to do that. And some of the search engines are using AI to create these scripts. It's really simple, especially AI, because you can just say, hey, give me a PowerShell script that gets battery cycle count. Does that mean it's perfect and you should just put it into production? No, it doesn't, but it's usually a really good starting place for you. And then you can test and see if it's working right for you. All right. So what other tools?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I shared the link to Discord in the chat. So
thank you for that. Thank you for that. Right. So we won't spend a lot of time on some of these other fields because we want to show you, or some of these other, kind of tools, but we do want to say, hey, we have hundreds of built-in inventory fields, hardware inventory, software inventory in particular. We find that folks don't leverage enough for compliance related, and license information and utilization for licensed applications. All of that stuff you can do. Most folks use these to a degree in their environment already, obviously. Next slide, Josh. Right, and we can use reports and smart groups. Generally speaking, folks get confused sometimes about when you should use each, but smart groups are used for content distribution. I create a smart group like the example at left here, which is for all Windows students. What kinds of things would I want to send to all Windows student devices? That's where I want a smart group so I can assign content to them. Reports are better used when you want the data, but you're not going to do anything with it as far as distributing anything. I'm not if I just want to see something like the example at the bottom where we're looking at battery-based information, I'm not looking to do something with that from a smart group perspective. I just want to report on it. Reports don't really have performance impact in the way that smart groups do. Smart groups are reevaluated on a periodic basis. Reports really only evaluate when you run them, when you take a look at them. So in many environments, smart groups and reports are underutilized. And I don't mean that they're not used. It's that more of the folks focus on that deployment part of thing. Part of the equation. So maybe they'll create a smart group for doing deployment, but they don't use smart groups and reports to do things like compliance reporting. And especially, of course, I mean reporting here. And we're going to show you some examples of that here in a moment. All right. Next slide, Josh.
Yep.
You can also use geolocation. Lots of folks use geolocation. That does require user consent based on the platform. And you really do want to include it in any of your documentation to your end users. And you may not have noticed, but in the most recent version of FileWave, you've actually also got the ability to send user notifications to devices too, and make sure that your users are aware of anything that's important going on in your environment. Next slide, Josh. All right. And the kiosk, I don't need to show any of you the kiosk. Everybody uses a kiosk, and you know what it's good for, which is to allow users to do administrative type stuff without being admins on their devices. Okay. Now we're going to get into the real example stuff. So let's talk about Grafana. What Grafana is, it's included with FileWave. It's a third-party tool, open source solution that allows us to do aggregate reporting, right? So you can create a report within FileWave, and then go into Grafana and build from it an aggregate report. And Josh and I are going to do a little demo of this now. I'm going to walk him through it as if I was walking you through it. So Josh, if you want to hop into your admin console here, and we're just going to build a report real quick in your admin console.
So I'm gonna make a new dashboard, right?
Yeah, well, let's start in your proper FileWave admin first.
Oh,
because we need a report.
Okay.
Right. So what we're going to do, right? Let's create a pie chart for the count of devices of various OSs in your environment. Right. So let's create a new report. Right, or an inventory query, and you can call it OS count, right? That's fine. What's the criteria? Really no criteria. We want to look at all devices, but in fields, right? What do we want to see? Well, we want to see device name probably. I would use OS, use device name, right? So we want that field. And then I would use OS type, OS space type, but you can browse through here to look at all the different types of things. But if we add OS type there for all those devices, we can see in Josh's little lab environment here, we've got 34 devices, and we've got, kind of a breakout of devices by platform. A lot of them are Chrome devices, right? So there's a report.
It doesn't have a type.
Yeah, so you can go back to, if you see something like this, it's a perfect practical example. You can go back to criteria, and you can say drag OS type in there and say is not.
Oh wait, I wouldn't say is not.
You can't do not null on that one. So evidently that's not supposed to be. But let's leave it because it actually provides an example for us to do something.
Okay. I suppose I could have made like a bunch of ors and said that it's iOS or Mac OS or Windows. Yes. So I could have filtered for it.
Yeah. So, but this is typically the type of report that folks will do where they build a report for themselves, and maybe they isolate it to iOS and say, here's my report of iOS devices, right? But when we want to look at aggregate reporting, we want a picture of the whole environment. And this detailed type of report is good, but it doesn't give us a picture of our environment. Let's build a picture. So go ahead and save that.
Okay.
And then in dashboards in Grafana, you're going to go ahead and create a new dashboard.
Oh, and I should take a step back. I got here by being in my FileWave admin. Because if you've never gone to this, you might not know where to get to it.
Hey, Josh, can you show that password there? I don't know.
Yeah. So here I am in Anywhere, and there's a dashboard. And you might wonder about this dark mode. It's just a Chrome extension. We didn't add dark mode to Anywhere yet, but I click there and I can get into Grafana.
Yeah, and then from here, you can use the breadcrumbs to go to the dashboard's view. And then here we can say new and new dashboard. And we're just going to add a visualization. And you're going to see how easy this is to do, right? So what's our source? It's going to be that FileWave tabular data source.
The second one.
Right? Yeah, and so down at the bottom where it says select metric, our metric is the report we just created. So if you type in OS space count, you're going to see the report that you just created is in there already. Okay, and if you switch that view to table, right, you can see that's exactly the data that we were looking at in FileWave. But that's not helpful because it's not aggregate data, it's the detail view, right? And we really want to create a pie chart. So in the top right there, we're going to switch that to a pie chart. Right? And that doesn't give us any data yet. Why doesn't it give us data? Because we don't have anything to aggregate on. So if you're going to click on that transform data, Josh, and what we got to do is tell it what to group by and what to count. It's actually really easy to do. So look here in this list of transformations for the word group by. So we're going to click that one, and that's going to transform this data. And we're going to say that the device name, that's going to be the thing we're going to count. Right? For every type of OS, we're going to count the number of devices. So you say calculate, and then there you choose count. You can type it in. There you go. And then for OS type, we're going to say that's the thing we're going to group by. And now we've got data, but it doesn't quite look right because on the right it says to show calculate based on a single value. Over on the right, you're going to switch that to all values. And now we've got our chart. And that's it. And then if you scroll down a little bit on the right, Josh, you can actually say to move the legend over to the right, for instance. There's all sorts of granular controls, but yeah, if you click on right, see that moves that, and then just click apply. Right up at the top, you can also name it.
Oh, I didn't name it, but now that I'm here, I can get back to editing it if I want. And it does this thing.
That's the null.
Yeah.
That's that one null value.
Because of that del, which of course I could have tweaked the query to just include device types that are known, and then it wouldn't have that.
In fact, there's a transformation for that where we can actually say if it's null to set it to a value, and we have time for that practical example here today. But you can actually account for that here at this layer too. So that's all it took. If you click apply, that's it. It's on your dashboard, and that is now you can drag it around, you can resize it, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. That's all it takes, right? So when I said advanced, we mean not used so much, but not hard, right? So this is Grafana, and you can use that for aggregate reporting of all sorts of things, right? So you can do some really fun stuff. All right. So that's kind of a practical do-it-yourself example. What else do we have to talk about here, Josh, on this topic?
Did you want me to go to the presentation or show off the other dashboards?
Well, let's go back to the presentation, and we'll take a look at the content pack topic, and then we'll come back.
And I guess also quickly, just take a second, is in the KB. So we have a link for it, but there is. So everybody should shelves. That QR code will take you to this content packs where there's a bunch of examples. So I just want to. So this QR code, if you take a picture of it, then you'll have the way to get there.
Well, that's the one for using Grafana for aggregate reporting.
It was. I have the QR code for content packs too. You're right.
Okay. All right, so anyway, that's really quickly doing something with Grafana in a very simple way, but that really simple way can be used in lots of places. If we go to the next slide, I think we're talking about content packs now, right? But let's go back to our Miro board for just a second, because I want to, we talked about the tool sets a little bit. And so I just want to give an example here of when we build these things, because this is going to segue right into the thing we're going to talk about with content packs. Let's say if we wanted to look for something like antivirus version, right? Now we've deployed maybe a file set to install the right version of Sophos. Is it the right version? If we want to make sure it's the right version, what elements would we need to build a beautiful dashboard that allow us to police that, right? Well, we don't have a field that's specifically for antivirus version, but we can get that actually from just normal software inventory, actually, Josh. We don't even necessarily need a custom field for that, right? Because our software inventory that comes from devices will show that Sophos is installed and show what version it is, right? If we were instead, though, looking at antivirus definitions, that is something where we'd likely need a custom field, right? So we would have to create a custom field for it, because otherwise we won't have the information. But if we go back to antivirus version, okay, well, we've got the antivirus version from an inventory report, but how do we get that into a proper report that's only about antivirus version? Well, we're going to duplicate that and put it in the reporting section, right? So we're going to create a report that only looks at that software data, right? We're going to create a report for it, just like we did for that OS count report. And then from there, well, now we're going to go ahead and create a dashboard for that from that report, and likely from other reports like the antivirus definitions and the antivirus, maybe the engine version and all of these different things that we might want to look for. We have to kind of stitch all of these things together, right? And then we can take those multiple types of reports and put them on the same dashboard, if that makes sense. Right? So we can put and stitch all of these elements together, right? And now that may be a lot of work for you. And that's the idea of content packs. So if you go back to the presentation, Josh, and we go back to that next slide, right? That's the idea behind us, next slide, doing content packs, is to take all of these things that need to be kind of stitched together, right? The custom field that reads the antivirus definitions, or the report that reads the version of your software, and couple that with file set groups and smart groups where it's appropriate, with deployments where it's appropriate. And in this case, where it's just a report and a dashboard, right? So we've got a couple of examples here for you. The first is actually going through and importing a content pack. So these are in the knowledge base. They're there for you to be able to download and then import them into your environment and just immediately get data back. So Josh is going to show us importing the brand new content pack that we just created. Many of you may not have noticed that in 15.5 we added MDM command history into inventory, and that allows you to get an overview of what's going on with your Apple MDM environment. So Josh has already downloaded this from the knowledge base, but there's a little uploader tool. And that uploader tool in this case is for this MDM history dashboard. You just need to give it your credentials and the API token to use.
And I will show this, and I will promptly destroy it on my server after this session, the API key. So I'm going to go to Manage Administrators, and I'll show.
You don't have to show it if it's on another window.
Yeah. I'm going to copy the actual one, and then copy. I'll just make a new. So this is just this dummy user, right? But every user, so I went to Manage Administrators, has a token, and this token is valid in theory, but this user has no rights, so he can't really do anything bad to my server. But protect these tokens. They're like the username and the password to your server. You don't want people to get them. But I copied this, including the equal sign. A lot of times when you double click, you won't get the equal sign, and that's where people mess up with API tokens. So I'm going to destroy that user real quick. but I
And
did
you may say, you know, why do we need the credentials and the API token? It's because we're using multiple tools to, you know, Sean Holden, I think, is on the call, and he did a lot of work to build this thing. And it works great to import all of the different elements. So we use the command line tools for importing some of the elements, and we use API calls for others. But this is using our own FileWave tools to bring this data in. So in this case, if you go and take a look, and this is in the knowledge base, by the way, you can go get this yourself. But if you take a look at this, you can go ahead and upload that, Josh.
I'll run it. And there is a step after this. Once it's all done, it will give you a little output about what it did. It made 2 queries, so you can know what to look for. And it made this dashboard file that we're going to have to import. And it does a model update when it runs. So that's one thing that someone mentioned that they didn't really think about when they ran it, was that a model update will happen at the end, so that changes like custom fields are actually committed.
So in this case, if you look at the knowledge base article on this, it tells you a little bit about what it's doing. But basically, this content pack is just 2 reports and the dashboard. So that output of that command told you that you know, this gives you the explanation, and this is where you can download it. And it gives you a sample screenshot of what the dashboard will look like, what kind of data you get out of it. So Josh has just run that tool. So that has imported the reports. If we look in his environment at the reports, if you're still in anywhere, Josh, you can go in there and we should see those, or in your proper admin.
New dashboard import, and I'm going to import from that tool. It's going to put into cache and then dashboards, and it told me that in the tool. It said where to get it. And once it goes in here, I import, and so now I have that dashboard based on the data. That's all I had to do to get this. And even if you don't want this the way that it is, you could import it and then change it any way you like.
Yeah, and this is an example. You know, this is in Josh's lab, so it's a relatively small environment, right? Not so many devices, but this is looking at Apple MDM command history. That command history is limited to 7 days or 500,000 commands, whichever is kind of hit, whichever limit is hit first. But this is also, I want to mention, an opportunity where we, you know, are using our product to do something, and we notice that we did some things that maybe we could improve. So for instance, in this top layer, Josh, can you collapse the other sections, and then we'll just look at the top one. So we included several sections here. If you look at the top, which is about application installs, this is showing you, and we can see that we don't actually have application names in the command history. So eventually we're going to fix this so that can be bundle identifier, because the number that it's referencing is not super helpful. But we can see that it's doing those installs, and you can see in the center chart there that one device responded with a not now, but all of the other commands that were sent for install application were acknowledged by the device. And of course, we don't know whether they worked or not, but we get that information. And then I'll have to look at that last chart, because that not now, 10 not now, or sorry, that 10 that you see there is actually about the file set that gave the response of not now.
Yeah, this guy.
Right. Right. So, but this is the kind of thing where you go and build this and you say, man, that would really be better if I had the app name. Well, that's a perfect thing to bring back to us, right? And if you're building something like this and you see that something's wrong, bring that back to us in product board and let us know. And you'll see something similar when we look at profiles, right? That profiles you see on the left, that it gives you the profile. And you may have noticed this when you look at MDM command history for an individual device, that gives you profile ID, not profile name. So where it's Joshua's Apple Studio A3 D18, blah, 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 it's not super readable. So that little chart on the right is showing you what the actual names are for those. So that's why we have 2 reports here. And then you can see for each of those profiles, whether they were good or bad, right? What were the errors? That's the chart that's just off the screen there. Right. And then specifically, if we look at the next section, it's looking at errors in the environment. And if we look at those errors, now Josh's environment doesn't have a lot, but if you see that second device there, it actually has 20 some errors, right? So it's nice to be able to look at an overall environment. And I think you still got the KB article up there, Josh. If you go flip back to that screenshot there real quick, you can see in the screenshot that's provided here, scroll down a little bit, there you go, that there's a device that is really struggling to process commands, right? And so then you could say, wow, that device has all these not nows. What's going on with that thing? Maybe we can restart it, because that's, part of the proactive management we're talking about. These error counts tell you, wow, those are devices that are really having a problem. And you can do something about it. And last section that's in that report is a section on just generally what's going on, right? And so you can see all of the different types of commands that have gone out to devices. And then for each of those, barring profile and app install commands, what other things are failing for you, right? So, Josh, we've got just a couple minutes left. If you want to show, this is just one example of a content pack and a dashboard. I think Josh has got a couple others here in his lab to walk you through a little bit.
I have the Apple MDM one that Sean
Yeah,
made.
let's take a look at that great thing that Sean did.
And you can see things, last connected less than a week, between a week and a month. You can find things that have kind of been dropping off. You can find things that don't think that they're MDM enrolled, perhaps, because that can happen, that the device suddenly thinks that it's not MDM enrolled. So this thing can validate. In my case, everything is good. All 3 devices think that they're enrolled. The device enrollment state, fully enrolled, only 3 devices, but and then the type, so this is a DEP enrollment, and these are user approved enrollments. It can be helpful to see that if you think that it should be all DEP, for instance. And then this one was the client and MDM enrollments are like where it's enrolled, and the MDM reported server. So this one was none reported. I had some devices that haven't been online. So one thing to think about when you make a dashboard is, what will the values be for the devices that are powered off in a drawer? I have a couple of devices that are off that never got to report in. So you're going to have no value for that custom field, perhaps. And then everything else is in support too. Well, the whole one device. And then the APNS token, this one was Mac OS, and this one was also Mac OS. Oh, the value. See the little topic value? So this was a case of reporting again. If all 3 devices reported in and my APNS token, my Apple Push Notification Service token, was correct on all of the Macs, then they would all report in this string that E6, DD, 2D, blah, 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 would be for all 3. But in this case, they haven't been online to report in. So you just want to think about that when you're making a dashboard, and think about if the value you're seeing is a bad thing or if it's in a drawer.
Well, and a practical example of that is if you've ever accidentally, and I know nobody would do this, but if you've ever accidentally renewed an APN token under the wrong username and imported it in an enrolled devices, you may actually have more than one APN token in your environment, and that would allow you to identify which ones are wrong as well. And and we're not providing these dashboards to say, hey, this is the way you need to do it. What these are meant to be is, here's a great starting point for you, and you can modify it in any way you see fit. So you can resize these things, you can move them around, you can organize them in a different way. And likely, if you try these, you're going to find that they're really catchy, and you're going to want to build your own as well.
Yeah. And we will go probably a little past the hour. So if you missed the end of this because you can't stay, it'll be on YouTube. We're going to post this on YouTube so you can catch the end. But these dashboards, like the Windows Health dashboard that Tony made when we released, I think 15.5 maybe. It also has lots of helpful stuff, like what host, server, or booster are the devices talking to, and devices last connected. It breaks it up by date, so December, November, August can be good. And you might get ideas from any of these. Like, I think device location is super helpful if you're collecting that information, because if you're a school based in Texas and you don't have any students abroad or teacher abroad things, and you see devices that are checking in Turkey, why is that? So it can help you identify devices. Maybe you didn't remove them from FileWave, and you should have, or maybe they've walked and you just didn't realize. So location can be a helpful thing for knowing if something has drifted away. And for Windows patching, the UBR number for Windows patching, that's the update build revision for Windows. And that number tells you how patched a Windows system is. And so you can use that number to tell if you're effective on patching. So that is, and these things I know we wanted to show, some of these are driven from inventory, and some of them are driven by custom fields. So like UBR was a custom field that is in my server. And so I believe, well, I could probably just type UBR.
It's right there, Josh. It's right in the center.
Update build revision. So I can see it here, and I could see, what the script is. Mac OS doesn't have a Windows update build revision, but Windows does. And it's a very simple PowerShell that has an output of a number, and you can just report on that. So those content packs are pretty cool. When you add them to your server, they're not going to start deploying things. They are going to create custom fields, queries. If you follow the directions, it will create the dashboard as well. That's that manual import step at the end. They can create groups and smart groups, but they won't start deploying content. So you can pretty safely bring them into your server.
Yeah, they're set up to allow you to deploy content, but we don't actually assign any targets to anything. You do that step yourself for safety reasons, obviously.
Yes. Did we want to show anything else here, or jump back to the presentation too?
No, I think that's good. We just want to say thank you for everybody for joining today. Those content packs, the ones we showed here today, and others, they're examples in the knowledge base, and they really do empower your environment to be able to look at, ask yourself the question: what things do I need to, if I'm a school, well, I expect TestNav to be on all my devices, and I expect that TestNav to be right. So it's super helpful to have a chart that shows me devices that are wrong, right? Wrong version, right? And are in production. So, think creatively a little bit about what you're doing for compliance in your environment. Make use of these content packs. We go to a lot of effort to build them so that, kind of gives everybody a jump start on doing some really advanced stuff. And we just want to see you, make the most use of your investment in FileWave. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate you making the time. And we'll talk to you again in the new year.